Talking about how to make iOS development more fun with ChatGPT. I should do it with ChatGPT, or at least try to, because as you'll see, it's not smooth sailing. It's like it works, but not 100% of the time. So about me, I'm Klemen. I'm a senior developer at Meetup, which is ETF provider in Australia. I really need to figure this one out. This is my God. I started with Objective-C, and I've been making apps for 10 years now. When I started, for example, my first app was a flashlight app, because iPhones back then, they didn't have just a button to turn on a flashlight. So you need just a separate app for a simple task like that. I've made apps for iOS, macOS, tvOS, and watchOS, but mostly iOS because it's just kind of the platform that I use the most. So the big question, will ChatGPT take my job, or your job, our job? No, for now. I think we probably have a few years left, I would say, with the current progress that they're making in that field. But for now, I think we are still safe. So what is ChatGPT? Just a very brief overview. So it's a large language model, LLM, which is basically, I literally got to read this part, a neural network trained on vast amounts of text data. So basically, let's go back. Basically, they just took half of or most of the internet as a text, dumped it in, and then, oops, should put it on good. And then just basically let it train on that text, and it just made sense of that text that I put it in, which is amazing by itself. That was wrong. So it understands and generates human-like text, which I imagine, actually that should have been my first question. Who here has used ChatGPT so far? Wow, so kind of, maybe I'll just skip to the end. There's no point. Oh yeah, is there a point?
You don't need to know what you know.
Okay. Let's continue then. So, as you guys probably know, it understands and generates human-like text really well, surprisingly well. Like sometimes it just blows your mind. Sometimes it gets confused on the most basic of things. That's just how it is. The downside is right now that the knowledge cutoff, it's September 2021. So if you ask it about anything that was released, let's say software-wise, it doesn't know anything that's newer than 2021 September, which kind of sucks because if you're working on some new frameworks, for example, and that framework was released last year, ChatGPT won't know about it. So it's kind of useless in that sense. So applications where you can use ChatGPT, conversational AI, and make it make sense. It's called ChatGPT. So, it can generate content quite well, but sometimes very generic content. It's quite good at code writing and 1,000 more things that probably you guys can imagine that you used ChatGPT for. So is it actually useful to use it? We're going to go through some examples how I've tried using it, or I am using it through the workday. So code generation, I would say, is like a quite basic one. It's quite good at generating Swift code snippets. So let's say you have to generate, I'll have an example later, but let's say you have to generate like a validator to validate if an input string is correct. You can easily just ask it and it's going to generate the whole code for you. Very nice. Yeah, it's very nice. It saves you time for doing repetitive tasks. So let's say you have a JSON response from a server, and you know you're going to have to create like a model and like the whole, basically the model's in code for that JSON to parse it. and it's quite good to take that, like in taking that JSON and parsing it in code. It's actually really good. Like I've used it in a few JSON examples, and it's really good how it takes the JSON and recognizes the structure and then creates really nice models for you, quite clean, not like some other like converters, JSON to like a Swift model where you get a lot of like boilerplate. I felt like with ChatGPT, a lot of times I got like a cleaner output, and it's quite nice that you can also kind of say to it like, oh, actually I don't like this. Can you change this? Can you change the style? It's actually gonna like update the code and give you like a better output that better suits your needs. So it's quite nice. Improve productivity and code quality. Productivity. Careful. Productivity, yes, it's quite useful, especially when you get stuck in something. It's quite useful to use it and just kind of, as I'll have later in the slides, to kind of use it to like brainstorm different ideas. Code quality, I would say yes and no. A lot of times it gives you results that are very, very generic. So it's like it literally just learned from GitHub, and I mean it's okay, but it's not like the best code ever. So I would say the code quality will come in ChatGPT 4 or 5. Sorry, 4 we have 5 or 6. But right now the code quality itself still, it's not the greatest. And then this is a how do you call this? Forgot the word. But like a phrase that ChatGPT made. So it's the closest thing to a code writing genie you'll ever find. This is literally a quote by ChatGPT, because I asked it. This whole presentation was made using ChatGPT. So example of code generation, I asked it to write an email validator in Swift and just kind of define what I want. So I wanted to have the object should be of type enum, it should be called email validator, and it should contain a static function that validates an input string and returns a bool whether the email is valid or not. And I got this first try. Just quite good, especially the regex that it gave me. I mean, I don't know that, so I would probably start searching like Stack Overflow to get that information. So it's quite useful to get like this kind of nice example, and it's really good. Like it was faster than me writing it. It was probably much faster than me searching online and like going through all the Stack Overflow pages and be like, oh, which one has the most likes and like upvotes. Just much faster. But it doesn't end there. It also explained to you how you can use it, which is really amazing. So it literally gives you an example how you can use it and like how it will work. And you could actually even ask it back, like, oh, I don't understand this, like, can you explain in more detail? And it would actually explain the logic that it gave you in more detail for you to understand, which if you ask a coworker to do that, they would probably be like, ah, Jesus, he doesn't understand anything, and they'll get annoyed. ChatGPT doesn't get annoyed for now. It's quite good. Unit tests. That's a big one, because we all know we need unit tests, but no one likes to write them, because they're boring. Right? So with ChatGPT, really good use case is to generate test cases for basically your app, maybe for your view model or for just different functions that you have. It's good also, let's say you already have unit tests, it's quite good at giving you suggestions and different like edge cases that you didn't cover yet with your unit tests, so you can get closer to that 100% code coverage. And yeah, you can improve test coverage and overall app quality by using more unit tests, which is always great. Less crashes, happier users, more downloads, more money. Yeah, pretty much. And it can make writing tests fun, because instead of you just kind of spending, like being depressed and like writing the tests one by one, you first ask it to like generate some test cases. You kind of check. You are the one running what ChatGPT wrote. So basically, it's kind of like you are testing ChatGPT, and then you just kind of check that it's all good. You verify that it's correct. It's much less effort, and it just makes it funner and also gives you that satisfaction that you know that you have unit tests now and when you make a PR, your coworkers would be like, oh yeah, unit tests, nice. And an example, I literally asked it in the same chat with ChatGPT after it gave me that validator. I was like, write unit tests for this email validator, and it gave me that to automate, like directly code that I was just able to copy paste in Xcode for valid and invalid emails with examples, the valid ones and invalid ones, which is awesome. I mean, wow. And after that, so I tried running it and failed, right? And it failed because the two emails that are in the invalid emails actually still pass that validator because the regular expression that it has didn't cover those edge cases. So what I did is basically kind of told it to, hey, it failed on this and this. Can you fix the original validator? And it did. It made like really long, huge ass regular expression. And I reran the test, same test, and it passed. So sometimes make mistakes. You know, it's not perfect, but it's very good that you can kind of say what it did wrong, and it's going to correct. And it has a really good context, like what you're saying about, and just it's really good. I should also note that all the examples and everything I'm talking about was done using ChatGPT 4, not 3.5, because that one loses context a bit too fast. But yeah, this was done in ChatGPT 4, and quite good. So another thing you could use it for is testing out ideas. It's quite good to kind of quickly prototype app architecture ideas. Let's say you want to implement something, but like you're not sure how to approach it. You can literally ask it, and it's going to give you some examples, probably from some other GitHub repositories that you read that. But you know, it's good to get you thinking. To like, oh, you start thinking, oh, maybe I should do like, oh, maybe I could approach it like this. It's quite good. It kind of makes you think, I would say, faster because it's kind of helping you, and you're not just stuck there and just like looking at this one idea. You kind of looking at different possibilities. Yeah, this is a quote by ChatGPT. Let ChatGPT be your virtual brainstorming partner. So it's kind of like, in a way, it's similar to how when you go together, like when you get together with your coworkers and you kind of brainstorm and draw on the board and stuff. But here it's just you and your ChatGPT. You're just texting, which I guess in the future it might be just voice and maybe even like some AI generated video. So you will actually be talking to like a person. So it's quite good to kind of get you brainstorming. You share ideas and like, oh, what about this? And then it kind of has its own opinion, even though the opinions it has are really weak. Like even if something it says is correct, and you say, no, it's not, it's going to be, oh, I apologize. Don't apologize, like it is correct. Right? But it's still good to, like start the developing the idea, and yeah, it's good. Debugging, it's also quite helpful for debugging. ChatGPT said that it's good at identifying potential issues within your code. I mean, personally, I think not yet. I tried using it on like a really big piece of code, and so the fix that it suggested was kind of useless. So I think that's not yet true. Like I said, this was written by ChatGPT, and it thinks quite highly of itself, I would say. Receive suggestions for optimizing code performance. That can be quite true. I've seen it before. A piece of code that I thought it was quite optimal. It suggested like a shorter version using like reduce and a map on a collection. So that's quite nice. And it's really good with getting help with error messages. Sometimes you might be stuck and like, oh, what is this error? And actually, if you just kind of paste the error message and the piece of code where you're getting this error message on, it's quite helpful a lot of times to kind of either you get a solution immediately, or at least it gets like it kind of you start thinking in that way, and it kind of just evolves naturally that you get to the solution faster. At least from my experience. I should note that this is my experience. your experience may differ. But yeah, it's quite good because it just feels like you have someone to kind of talk to, complain to, and then it kind of gives you ideas, and some ideas are just bad, but sometimes there's like one that's like, oh okay, maybe I could try that approach. So yeah, it's quite helpful. Change logs, that's like a really basic one. We all have been there where you have like a change log and you gotta make it like a nice release message, right? To like for test users, and it's just it's a trainer. Like I don't want to do that. So it's really good to use ChatGPT to transform GitHub release notes or any release notes into like a detailed human readable change log. So it can automatically summarize changes, improvements, bug fixes. Like it's really good at that. It's really good at just making text. It's really good at text. It creates like a clear and engaging documentation for users, and it's really easy. Basically, you just give it like a change log for like your GitHub release, and it can make. I'll show you what. So, for example, this is an example of your change log. Let's say make a new release of the app. This would be like your ticket number in your Jira or whatever. That would be the name of the task, who made it, and the PR number. But you can't use this, right? You can't send this to test users. I mean, what is this? So you can ask it to make this a bit nicer. Bam, it refactors, removes the tickets, makes it kind of more, feels like you put effort, even though you didn't. It just makes everything easier. And then you can even, if you need an even shorter summary, you can just ask it to write the same thing summarized in one sentence. Bam, you have one sentence that summarizes very broadly what are the changes, which is quite helpful. To me, it's really amazing how you can just use it for like basic things like that. Yeah. Code reviews. We're all doing code reviews, hopefully. Who's doing code reviews here? Code reviews. How much? Okay. You should do more code reviews, guys. When you make a PR, you gotta get your feedback. So if you ask ChatGPT, it can do almost everything. Yeah, I don't think so, not yet. I would say a real use case is understanding code written by others. So a lot of times it happens, like you get a piece of code that your coworker wrote, and you're just like, what the heck was he thinking? And quite a few times I pasted that code to ChatGPT and asked it like, what is this? How does it work? And it knew better than I managed to figure it out. So it's a really simple use case, but it just saves that 5 minutes of you kind of, where is this going? Yeah, just it's a simple use case, but I would say it works for now. In the future, I'm pretty sure with like Copilot X that's coming to GitHub, it's gonna do much more for code reviews than just that. So that's gonna be another big step. App localization. So it's quite easy to localize apps to almost any language. Well, we spoke, so it's really easy. But in a lot of languages, if you don't have context, that one word that you're translating can mean many things. So it's quite important that you provide comments for each translation. So let's say you have your .strings file where you have all the English English strings. You do want to have basically comments there, so you can explain to ChatGPT that those comments mean kind of explain the context of the translation, and then you can do the translations quite well. It's really good at translating just any text. I've tried to translate to my language, was quite good, and from my language to Korean was quite good, and back to English. So yeah, it's surprisingly good, especially if you give it like a big chunk of text, which is literally what I just said. It's really good at translating text. The big thing, Xcode integration. Sadly, no official ChatGPT or Copilot plugin. So basically, if you want to go the official way, what one of my coworkers do is that they have Xcode open on half the screen, and then they open the same file in Visual Studio Code, and then he writes a bit of code in Xcode, saves it, puts focus on Visual Studio, and then it suggests what he should pre-fill the code. And then he uses Copilot in Visual Studio Code, saves it, and it updates back in Xcode. I mean, it can be done, but honestly, I've never tried it. I've just heard stories. It just feels. I mean, if it works for you, then okay. But I would say not the best way. There's also an unofficial plugin, Copilot for Xcode. It's a bit slow sometimes. It's definitely not as fast as Visual Studio Code, and it requires quite a lot of permissions to set it up. So it is an open source project. I personally am not using it on projects for like for your job because I don't know. It's fairly new. It's open source, and I didn't have the time yet to kind of go through the source code. But if you want to try it out, be my guest. I do feel that in the future it would be really good if Apple or maybe I don't know, even GitHub, if they made like an official Copilot plugin for Xcode, because it does save you a lot of time, especially like a lot of boilerplate, like a lot of the code that we just do every time. Why would you, right? So it is definitely the future to have something like a Copilot for Xcode. But yeah, we're not there yet, sadly. But I imagine that people who do like web here, some other front-end people, you do front-end. So you're probably using Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio. So have you used Copilot? Not yet. No, you should. I've heard stories that it's quite good. But yeah, it's definitely like assistants like this, if you can call it an assistant, as definitely the future of programming. It's kind of like autocomplete, but it just does a bit more than just completes. It's the next level of autocomplete, I guess. Pitfalls. You still need to understand the code, which I guess is also a good thing, because that's why we still have jobs. Because when you don't need to understand the code, and just anyone can just say, oh, I need an app, this and this, and just like outputs a perfect 100% code that works, yeah, that's a problem for us. So for now, you still need to understand the code, so you still need to be a developer, so that's a good thing. But it also means that you can't rely on it 100%, because two things. Sometimes it makes things up. It's really good at bullshit. It just makes things up, doesn't exist, but it just finds it. Like ChatGPT 4, I would say it's a bit better, but with 3.5, I've had a lot of use cases where it just kind of makes things up that are not true, or functions that don't even exist on iOS. So yeah, just to be aware of. And it's almost too human. It makes mistakes. So it can happen quite even on ChatGPT 4. You ask it for a thing. I guess the email validator is a good example. The output was good, but when it did the test for its own code, it didn't actually work. So I had to tell it, look, this doesn't work here, and it corrected it. But to even make the mistake at the first place, it's kind of too human, I would say. Just it makes mistakes, which is something to be mindful of, I would say. So what should I do? What should you do? I would say embrace tools like ChatGPT to become a better developer. I would say that if you, I would say that it's like you have two types of developers, right? Developers who will embrace all the new tools, and they will be more productive and have jobs in the future. And a lot of developers, not all, but a lot of developers who will not use all the tools, and the productivity will be low. They just won't be the same level. I'm not saying all. You always have a niche, an expert in a field that will always have a job, but you have a lot of people who, because they will not use the new tools, it's like, let's say you're applying for a job, and you have two candidates. One who can use ChatGPT or a tool like that, and is really good at it, or someone who's like, oh, I've never heard of it. And if they have same qualifications and similar skills, in the future you're probably going to take the one who has experience with that. Because like you've probably read in the news and all over the internet, with tools like this, a lot of like not just developer job, even like everything that has to do with accounting and computer stuff. What you need now, like what the company now needs 5 people, it's probably going to be 2 or maybe even just 1 person in the future. So you probably want to be that 1 person. Yeah, that's about it. That's questions.
So if anyone has questions, I will pass the mic so everyone can hear.
At work, I'm backend developer and I'm using the ChatGPT trial version, which is 3.5. And while I do not have a conversation with it, I lost connection so frequently, and it makes me so pissed. So
Yeah.
you use 4, and it's never happens like
that. To me, never so far. I know when I was using 3.5, let's say I started chatting about I need this model and this, and then like, I don't know, 5, 6 messages down the conversation, I asked it about like what I was talking at the beginning, and it's like, oh yeah, here you go, class person. I'm like, where is this coming from? There's no person, we're not talking about person here, like it was a completely different model. With ChatGPT 4 so far, it's really good at following context. 3.5, a bit less, so I would say try 4. I would say it's worth it. At least get that $20 one for a month and see. The big downside is though, it's much slower. When you're on paid version, ChatGPT Plus, and you're using 3.5, it's really fast. It's output instant. On ChatGPT 4, it's a bit slow. It's really like, it thinks a lot. It's like line, line, line.
Why
Even
is
the
that?
code, like that email validator, that's not just instant output. It's like, it takes time, and I assume because it's so much more complex. But you should try it. It's really good at following the context, and it doesn't forget things. Even if you open a chat from like, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, and just ask it something, it will still know what you were talking about before, because it's quite good.
Thanks.
What do you think about the UI stuff? Is ChatGPT useful for UI stuff as well? Actually, days ago, I asked ChatGPT to make some, notification screen, and I thought that the auto-generated screen was kind of, it makes no sense.
Yeah, I would say generating UI is, I don't think we're there yet, not with ChatGPT. It's a bit, maybe because design is very subjective, but I tried saying, I tried like a website, make like a landing page. I mean, it was a landing page, but I mean, if someone made that and get it like, oh, check this out, I'll be like, oh. Like it wasn't great. So I think for making UI, maybe for like smaller components where you're like, oh, how do I make like animation of this type? How do I make this button animate like that? Like really specific things, I think it can be great. Or like just, oh, how can I make a button transition from a corner radius of 20 to 50? That kind of logic, great. But like just letting it make design, not that great. I did see people use ChatGPT to generate prompts for Midjourney, and that was quite decent. So maybe that's more the future, where you use ChatGPT to generate prompts that then you use in a different tool that generates the actual UI, even though I know Midjourney is literally an image. But yeah, I think UI we're gonna have to wait a bit. So that means probably half a year. With the current speed, who knows?
Anyone?
So you said your coworker is using ChatGPT now. And did you decide it with your corporate? Did you talk about it? Because one big something that starts worrying me is if you send your toast, your test and your code review to ChatGPT, are you guys fine to send your source code to another company?
Definitely, that kind of reminds me of what happened at Samsung, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We never post whole code there. Like if I do tests, I do just one function. It's quite a generic function. It's kind of like I have a function that formats a function that formats money, right? So basically, it will have a money object that has a currency and an amount, and then I need tests to test the output, the display string in different locales. So this has to be locale based on the locale. Because some countries have the currency at the beginning, some have it at the end, some use commas, some use dots for the decimal separator, and so on, right? So we never do like whole view model bam done. We don't do that because we don't want stuff like Samsung to happen. That's also one reason why I'm not using the
plugin?
The Copilot for Xcode plugin, because I'm not sure what sends up. Like maybe the whole source code gets sent up with that plugin, right? So that's it's a really good point. Be aware that ChatGPT is not GDPR compliant, so be a bit aware what you send up there, because it will in the future most likely use what you just said and learn from it. So in the next iteration, it might use what you ask it to do to provide information or answer to someone else. So be quite aware of that. But yeah, good question.
This is kind of a question for like everyone. Recently, I've been using ChatGPT and I've been having a lot of like errors from it, such as like error, something went wrong with this persist, blah, blah, blah. And I get that like on every second request. I use the premium version of 4. I don't know why. Does anybody else have that question? Problem?
So I'll start, then everyone else can continue. I do see that issue maybe once a day, but it does feel to me so far connected to my session expiring actually, because after refreshing it works for the whole day. I did have a lot of those issues when I was using the free version, but so far on premium, it's been good. I'm not sure if it matters, but when you bought ChatGPT, did you buy like a US one? Because when I bought it was like a Korean license.
Yeah, I bought the US version.
So maybe the US one is getting slammed more, because I don't know, just guessing. But maybe there is like a regional difference.
Yeah, because I've only realized the problem in the last like week and a half that I've been in Korea. Like it's been like a huge decrease, and it's weird because it'll happen no matter like what question I do, even like the general prompt ones, it'll be okay, and then this next question I'll ask regarding it, it'll give me that. And even if I refresh, I'll go into like infinite loops, like I'll have to like log out, log back in to see if that'll fix it. Sometimes switching from Chrome to Firefox will fix it for a short period of time, but then it'll come back for whatever reason. So I was curious if other people have this, because it's almost become unusable, given that no matter how short my sessions are, I still get contact support, and then I go on support and I see that there are many people having that problem as well.
I mean, I could just add that I did notice that if you have a really long, let's say you have a JSON and you're like, I want to parse this to models, like if you have anything where the response is really long, a lot of times it just cuts off, like just mid-sentence, doesn't even finish, right? It's like, are you kidding me? But I did notice that if you just tell it, oh, can you continue from this, and either give it like a number, if it was like, paginated, or maybe just like the last sentence, can you continue from this? It will actually continue from there down, so you can get the full result, but it is a bit annoying. I should do like this. it is a bit annoying that a lot of times when you have a really long output from ChatGPT, it just cuts off like just mid-sentence. But you know, that's how it is if you use latest tech. It's always. Thank you.
Anyone? Okay, my turn. So I got two questions. One is, so for people using the trial version, would you advise them to, like, is it worth it to pay for the paid version? And continuing on that question, what would you advise people like using 3.54 and using the 4, or like what are the use cases for both versions?
I would say if you have simple questions, specifically like understanding errors and stuff, 3.5 is plenty good. But if you have more complex questions, I would say go with 4. But saying that, I did start with 3.5, and after realizing, oh, it's actually quite useful. You know, it is worth $20 to play with this thing. That's when I bought it. So I did start with 3.5. So I would suggest it. Try 3.5. It's free. Play around with it. And if you actually see value in it, and it is helping you, or at least you see that if it were just a bit better, it would help me. Then try the 4 or the ChatGPT 4, because the worst case you spend $20 for a month and then you cancel. So that's what, like 3 coffees now these days. It's not too bad.
Is there a difference between 3.5 on the free version and the paid one?
Yeah, the speed is huge difference. 3.5 on free is slow. 3.5 on when you have the plus subscription is quite fast. Like it's flying.
And the last question for me was, it's not just for you, but maybe for other people as well. So we've been talking about the security issue, like don't share your secrets on ChatGPT.
Yeah, don't share your password.
Yeah. But it was more like, we've seen the news related to Samsung regarding that issue, and is there some policies that were created in your companies related to that approach? Like some email that has been sent or some documentation related to, okay, use ChatGPT, it's fine, don't use it for that project, don't use it for just, I don't know, if someone wants, yeah.
So in my company, they don't allow us to use ChatGPT, even to send like the JSON, because they think they can profile the data like a kind of Facebook way to create a profile with all the questions you ask and kind of reverse engineering a question. So they don't want us to send any data related to the project to ChatGPT. So that's why I think it's kind of good to really make a book for like a startup or side project or for real company usage. I'm still thinking it's worth it.
Yeah, you definitely need to be aware of the security risks. I would say we're here iOS Meetup, right? So if you're working on the iOS app, you shouldn't actually have any secrets or anything in your app to compromise users' data, I would say. Like, you shouldn't. Backend, on the other hand, that's a different story. Right? You don't want to, like, if you're developing some, I don't know, financial system, ledger or whatever, backend service, you do want to be careful how you use ChatGPT or Copilot. But yeah, I think it's like with everything. There's benefit and risk, and you need to be aware of the risk. But I think if you use it for like, let's say you forget about the code generation, or like code generation to generate code from ChatGPT to help you, like solve things faster, why not? You didn't actually provide anything from your side, you just asked it, or to brainstorm ideas, to just kind of bounce ideas back. I think you can at least start with that. It's quite decent with that. And then just slowly, maybe don't start with dumping the whole project, pasting it in, and be like, improve code. That's probably the best way to start. But yeah. it's a really good point. Like, there's risk. Anyone else on that?
Or any other questions? Okay, so thank you very much, Klemen.
Thank you.